For me, when I was a child, I used to just love going and seeing performance. I just loved it. It wouldn't matter what it was, I just really wanted to see it, and it had a really great impact on me. With performance and with live performance, it's an experience that people have that actually should and can have an impact on the audience. It doesn't always do that, but that's the idea. We've had this sort of joke, I think it was about last year, where we were talking about the years that we've worked together with music, and we have never had one technical conversation or one conceptual conversation about the work. We just sort of make it.
Well, we arrived here to pick up some stuff, and the car's just died. We think it's the starter motor.
I do feel really confident about this project. I think that it will be a really interesting piece of work, and I think that's because the people on it are really fantastic and engaged and interesting, and I think the idea is interesting. And I think that unless we really blow it, it should be quite good. Yeah.
We had a workshop based around us developing our process, and we weren't necessarily at that point aware of what the outcome was going to be, but that we wanted to create new ways of working, and we wanted to push the material in different directions.
There are about 10 or 12 performers on it, and the work wasn't called Dark Taurus or anything at that point. It was just she wanted to kind of, I guess, look at new ways of approaching making work. So we had that workshop, and it just worked really well. Like the workshop was really successful.
We were actually auditioning performers for their relationships performatively, which was an interesting experience for us, and we were looking for quite diverse dancers and performers that could collaborate with us in a way, that we could put them into environments, and that the environments that they were experiencing would enable them to perform something that had some meaning in relationship to the experience that we'd given them.
You know, it's a collaborative writing process, and it's a process where you're often really intuiting. And, you know, like hopefully, you know, when you're writing a play, you actually get the script to a point where it really works. It's a dynamic, robust, self-contained work in a way that then is brought to life, you know. This kind of work, the two things are happening at the same time, and so to actually make a work that is able to both be lyrical, abstract, have readable characters, have relationship between characters, have a sense of kind of dramatic arc that is satisfying and fulfilled, and to kind of do all that within the limited time frame with multiple voices, you know, it's like really hard to get it right.
Because it's an abstract world, and I'm very keen to keep it like that, like not define each individual too much by character or by narrative, but each character does have moments of narrative and moments where they do have text, and they really define themselves by the action, and we can really clearly place, okay, they're doing this. And then other times it's not so clear, and it's more of a sort of an expression.
It's never really been a decision that I've made. It's just been something that I've always done as long as I can remember. Like, I trained as a ballet dancer, but as long as I can remember, I was a contemporary dancer. Like, when I was little, my earliest memories are of making up dances.
Dancing? No, I wouldn't say I was a trained dancer. I wouldn't even say I was a dancer, but, you know, I fall about, and Malia seems to think that's okay. I constantly looking at her for some guidance, and she gives me guidance, but mainly she says, no, what you're doing is fine, what you're doing is fine. But I get twisted, I'm falling over all the time, but no, I like that.
There used to be like these underage rages, like blue light discos type things. I went to one of those like when I was in maybe 5th form or something like that, and they sort of had this dance competition. And I hadn't done really any dance at all before. You know, and you were dancing and judge would come around, and if you got tapped on the shoulder, you had to go. And then it ended suddenly, amazingly, there was like 2 of us left, and I was one of them. I don't know if I was any good or anything, but I just had a lot of energy and stuff. $100 though.
I was 17. I already felt like I was too old to dance, because if you've grown up with ballet, you've grown up with people going into professional training at about 15 or 16. So I was kind of like, this is my last chance. If I don't do it now, it will never happen. And so I didn't really imagine what a future career would be. I just decided that I was going to give this training a go, and if I could make something of that, then I would worry about what happened afterwards, which is, I suppose, not what your father wants to hear.
I do well as an actor, and I survive, and I pay my bills and everything, but there's definite moments I have to be really, really disciplined about how I keep my money from earning, say, this job. You're sort of always living either in arrears or trying to forage your little amounts together to cover you for the dark 3 months that you might, have that has nothing planned, or the job that they've ticked you off for, but then they lose their funding, and so 2 weeks before you're due to start, you've got nothing.
It's a struggle, and I think in a sense, like when you're younger, it's a struggle, but in a different way, because actually everyone's kind of broke anyway, because a lot of it does come back to not having any money and being in that constant state of anxiety about how you're going to pay the bills.
There is a lot of freedom and a lot of like really amazing things that you get to do being a performer, but the sacrifice is not having the regular paycheck.
You make choices, basically. You make kind of particular choices, but those choices can lead you to really question and go, why am I doing this? And I think, especially, if your audience is small and you're like, well, is it worth this much of my energy and so forth if, only this many people are seeing it? Or what if I'm not really reaching the people that I want to reach?
People can decide themselves whether it's worth it. It's not my job to go, well, this is worth it. It's only worth it to me, but people can decide themselves whether they think the work is worth it.
It's an intuitive form for me. That's how I work with it. When I watch dancers moving, I know exactly what I want to see when I see it. because I work with individuals, especially within this process, I'm not trying to get them to do a movement that I make up. I make up the task and the qualities and the way in which they perform it, but their bodies and who they are come with that. So there's a negotiation process between what I want and who they are, and we meet in the middle, and that's really great for me because then I'm watching things that I can't do or that excite me from the performers, from what they can give. And so I'm very interested in the improvs that we do in this particular process, because a lot of the time they interpret my instructions or Emma's instructions or Eden's music completely differently to how I thought they might, and sometimes that creates new insight.
On the first day of rehearsing, we basically got them in and maybe talked for 5 minutes about the idea, and then we put them into pairs and sent them off and said, we want you to make a scene called Dark Tourists. And I think we've really taken the approach of we set them a task, but then we very much stand back and let them find their way through the material, and then we'll give them feedback and kind of new instructions. And that's
so it means that they sometimes fail within our instruction, which isn't necessarily, but we have to allow that to happen so that when we do find the things, that they've got both references.
The improv work is like panning for gold. It really is like that process of sifting and then things come out of it, but the majority of the stuff is kind of gravel.
We were quite nervous today, but and it's not like we're in control or anything. We've got a really strong bunch of performers that are, and because of that they're quite scary to direct, but they're easier to direct in a way because they provide so much information every time they work, even if things don't work. I mean, they're not the ones that are supposed to solve the problem, so we have to set the provocations that are going to allow them to really get in there and be juicy with the material or with the ideas, or
We've bought the main idea, and we're kind of from the outside shaping that and moving it in certain directions, because the performers will present you with like a huge wealth of material, and then you have to go through and think about that might be amazing material, but it's actually not part of this work, it's another work.
We want to use all the people, who they are, their experiences, and how they're approaching every task in the work. Oh, well, I think that, we were quite nervous today, but, and it's not like we're in control or anything.
So the question of the work really, or the question that we kind of started with, is why are we drawn to the suffering of others? What is that impulse? And I think we were interested in moving beyond a kind of a shallow reading, which is that it's a kind of a nasty voyeurism. That element is there, but the kind of flip side of that, because I think it's two things, is actually a desire to connect with. It's a sort of a compassion. It's a sort of a reaching out.
I come from a sort of a narrative background in most of the art forms I work in, but as a musician and songwriter for bands, I don't work in a narrative. I often work with images. Sometimes I make scenarios, but I look for ideas that I want to build on, and quite often the poetry just comes out as imagery and symbolism and metaphor, but nothing that you could say that's about that and that's about that.
There's a change from where the characters are at the beginning of the work to where they are at the end. Like, there needs to be a journey of some kind, and that doesn't need to be a narrative journey, but it needs to be an emotional journey. So that emotional journey comes from the relationships between the performers and how they change, evolve, disintegrate or whatever through that.
An event happened, and that event is never described, it's never explained. It could have been the Boxing Day tsunami, it could have been an earthquake, it could have been an atomic bomb. It doesn't really matter what occurred, but we have landed in this world of aftermath, and we've landed in this world where all the individuals are attempting to understand their place.
It is about the trauma that's happened to a certain place, an unnamed place, and how people survive that and what becomes of that. And tourism is a part of that. It's like Auschwitz or the Gaza Strip or the killing fields, that there is a kind of intrigue where places that have suffered or had macabre things happen, once there's a bit of time and distance, people like to go back there and mark that and look for the monument or look for the meaning in that place and what happened there.
For a start, I just looked at it as the idea of dark tourism and what that is, and that just threw up sort of ideas for me as to what are they going to see? Did it happen here? And then it sort of occurred to me that that's kind of what it's all about. The sort of vulture approach to tourism, where you just got to get there and you got to know exactly what happened and where it happened, and it's kind of, in the wider sense, it's like media in this country. Someone dies and dies a horrible death, and everyone, the media hold back the information and hold it back, and they give a little dribble here and they string it out, right, and everyone's just hanging on it until they get every single bit of information, and then they can move on.
Because it is such an abstract work, you can end up feeling like you're just an abstract thing, and that can end up being really difficult. Just you can find it difficult with your presence in the space. So I sat down last night and I kind of went through chronologically the things that I do in the work, and actually realised I've got a really clear relationship with Sean and with Peter in the work, and the work itself is about aftermath, and I think it deals with aftermath in kind of a big, broad scale of some massive crisis, but also for me, I think my crisis is a personal crisis. Something that's happened between Sean, Peter and I is the crisis that we're dealing with, and each of us are dealing with it in a different way.
Sean maybe sits in between worlds. He sits in the past before the event happened, I think, and he also sits in a future where he's looking back on how people dealt with it, because there's this definitely an aspect of how we memorialise events, and we create monuments and memorials to them, but any history that you record is a completely, it's the history of a survivor. So we're all survivors trying to rewrite a history that we can't necessarily agree on.
So I see all the characters as symbols. Like I see Sean's character as perhaps my brother, and I see my character as someone that's constantly searching for him, but also on the base level I'm talking now, and then maybe Julia's character as a sort of more of a pragmatic character that's sort of looking for the future. And in the wider sense, Sean's character is forgotten history. I'm constantly looking for history, and Julia's just wanting to move forward. History doesn't matter.
If anything, it's about trauma. It's about destruction, and it's all about those themes of post-traumatic syndrome, trying to create memories out of a shattered moment. And those aren't easy themes to deal with. That's why it's been important to constantly try to find the humour through it, because boy, you've got to let the audience in with humour, because if you're constantly grinding them with oppression, they're just going to tune out. They're going to say enough. They might respond and go, that's amazing, but there's a point where you just have to release them, and you can do it with humour, and there are moments.
Oh, Jesus.
I think that was a light bulb.
On lots of other projects, it's usually about getting a brief and following it and having a really clear roadmap, so the outcome can kind of be designed. But with this, there's no outcome that you can design. It's just every day you add a little, take a little away, and you build it like you're building a person. So it's got a lot of character, it's got everyone invested in it. So it's quite weird as a musician to not have structure, to not have anything to really hold on to in terms of process. And even the things that I've written aren't finished. Like, I don't consider them ever to be finished for this work at this stage, because it's constantly evolving, the way they perform it and the way that where it sits in the piece and what sort of vibe it's got. So I'm trying to remain open.
I think what interests me is that it's based in image and symbolism, and metaphors come to the fore in a different way than they do through speech and doing plays. And in a way, it's more painting, and I'm interested in that. And I'm interested in that as a performer, because it sets me up to be on stage in a different way, and I'm able to feel more confident about putting more out there images on stage, which is something I've always kind of had really enjoyed doing anyway, is sort of pushing the boundaries.
This is familiar territory. It's familiar because in the work that I've done with other devised theatre companies, and I tend to do quite a lot of it, it's a language that I'm happy to be in with. the seeming kind of chaos of it is actually not chaos. It's just a moulding, that's a constant process and a constant refinement that needs to occur, and it should be unapologetic about that.
At the end of the day, I mean, it really is the director, the directors, the choreographer who are shaping the vision, because the performers are in it, so they can't see it, so their role is different. So it's a collaboration in the sense that the authorship is shared, but ultimately somebody needs to be the person who makes the decisions. Otherwise, you'd be paralysed. And actually, the performers rely on you to fulfil that function, because they can't do both. They can't be inside and outside. And especially the closer you get to production, the more they need to be inside the world and the more you need to be outside of the world. But it's a kind of a thing where the value is equal, but the role is different.
Emma and I are really different, and we have really different ideas about things, but at the end of the day, performatively, we agree when something's working. We really agree. We pick out the same moments, so yeah.
So you feel comfortable with the process, and you feel comfortable with the
Well,
level of uncertainty and the kind of...
I have to until this week because I mean improvisation is a major part of my work. I really love improvisation, and I'm really fascinated by the process of choreographing, composing in the moment, and I'm also really interested in this. This has been a really intense process of improvising and then trying to lock down that sense of play within a set structure, and I was dubious about that to begin with, but I think we're going to achieve that. I don't know whether, because I feel like improvisation is about from form finding meaning, and choreography is about meaning to find form, and so this is somewhere in the middle of that, which I really like.
Well, I mean, I've done devised work before and collaborative work before, and so I'm familiar with it. It is a relief if you've been doing a lot of scripted work and a lot of pretty much basically structured theatre work or screen work, and it's very freeing in that way. You can really diversify on one certain point, and then the hardest thing I've found is the bringing together of all these amazing improvs and things like that. But it is a process that I know, but within that, devising can just take you anywhere and can make such strange twists and turns that you actually never really know what to expect from the day. Which is great, because you don't have to turn up going, I must know my lines, but you have to turn up going, I have to be ready and free to just go with what's going to happen today. I might end up on top of the roof, I might end up on the road. You just don't know.
Emma and Malia's working relationship is quite incredible, and it's sort of one person will direct, and then as they're sort of going, the other person sort of steps up, and they really complement each other's working methods. The only time that falls down is when they then turn to each other, and it's not that they block us out, but I guess that's what I was mentioning before about communication, is that's when it gets difficult, is when it's they know between themselves what they want, but when they tell us, I mean, they may have spent 2 hours the night before talking about it, and so when they come in and they give us a 10-word brief, and we're kind of like, wow, we need a bit more. Sometimes it's hard to follow the journey that they've gone on in their heads or in their conversation.
For the first couple of weeks, I had not a clue really what to do, actually. And, everyone was rehearsing things, and because they had stuff, and I really didn't have anything, and I just felt like, I'm not doing anything. You didn't really quite know how to contribute. You weren't really pulling your weight, because, and then, I don't know, something happened to get over that, and then started to make the character. So yes, answering your question, yes, I'm having to invest a lot of my own, because they're having to see the piece with everyone and everything. While that's all happening, I'm pretty much just trying to find where I fit in and what actions I can do, and then through that, in my character experience.
I did get to a point where I was making fewer offers because I felt like, because they weren't telling us what they saw so much, that they had a vision for it, and every time we sort of suggested or tried something different, they were kind of a bit frustrated by the fact that we were taking it off task. Well, not off task, but sort of to be able to make those offers and to check whether to repeat them, you need to have a conversation, and they're sort of like, no, we've got this, we've got to get the scene down, and they're really trying to achieve, in a short time frame, achieve each step of the process. So there can be a little bit of conflict where I guess we've been given the impression that we have quite a lot of autonomy over what we do, but then it comes down to it, we don't.
Like with devising, you can come up with a trillion amazing moments, but it's in that final week or 2 weeks when you have to decide which ones mean the most to you in this world, in this project, in this production. And, the pressure is on them to go, okay, we're looking from the outside in, and we're going to choose these pieces and string them together, and then we go, okay, how does that work with this? And then we kind of work out our little map. So I don't feel pressured by that or inhibited by that. I've enjoyed the process a lot.
It's a really hard thing to mould the three mediums of dancing, of acting, and of speaking, and adding those things. And that's been their aim in this, to try and do that. And I haven't got to watch the piece, but it seems like that it's seeming to work, and that kind of things come out kind of organically.
It's not more satisfying, but this process in particular is more gritty with the relationship that the music and the movement and the text and the ideas have. So we're just trying to be a bit braver, or a bit more kind of pushing it a little bit for ourselves, so that we actually are learning as we go as well.
Yep. Yep, I'm learning a lot.
How do you approach it?
I guess it's more poetic. If you think of poetry and how that's sort of structured, and it's not totally, it can jump all over the place, and it doesn't tell you everything. It just sort of gives you images.
The thing is that it's not really about any one thing, that there are images and there are themes and there are points of interest that we've all taken on board and that we understand to a certain level, and you may interpret that quite differently, but hopefully you will feel the emotion behind that, or how we feel about it anyway, regardless of what your understanding is, I think is the important thing.
If you think something, if you see something you think, oh, is that like that? Then you should go with that, and just go with that thread, and then that becomes your thread. And even if it's not exactly what they maybe had in mind, you'd maybe find that it's kind of something, it's a tangent of that, and then that can be your interpretation.
When it comes to something like devised theatre or contemporary dance, I think a lot of people hesitate because people don't want to be made to feel foolish. I don't understand it, therefore I must be stupid. But actually that's not the formula you need to approach a work like this. We go to galleries and we go to art exhibitions with a far greater openness to take on board what we're about to experience in an art gallery. And yet in a theatre we tend to blinker ourselves a lot more. So my answer to that is to try to encourage people to not try to understand it, but just let it happen. Because by letting it happen to you, it then becomes an experience. And no matter what the experience is, your interpretation of that experience is valid.
when we're watching dance performance, you should watch it intuitively, really, and sort of like how you respond to a painting and what you get out of it at that time. And it depends on how tired you are, or what kind of day you had, or whether you're feeling a little bit drunk, but all of those things influence how you will watch a performance.
Dance taps into your subconscious, so don't get stressed about not understanding. If you're on the ride and you're with us, that's enough, and you have to trust that stuff's filtering in, and it'll sit with you over the next few days. And it's not necessarily instant gratification. I think in this world of television and sitcoms and everything's instant gratification, it's something you have to work for.
You can go into it first off just watching people move, just getting off on them doing those things, being lyrical, being beautiful, being ugly to the music. Listen to the music. What's that doing? And it could be as simple as that. Obviously, in this one, because we are sort of setting up a narrative and characters, so you would be looking, okay, what's that? What's that? I don't know. Look for motifs. That is a really hard question. I mean, a lot of I go to performances and I go to dance, and I don't necessarily know fully what's going on. I mean, everyone's got their own interpretation. I think that's the main thing, is that you can have your interpretation, and that is valid.
Is there a stopper for this problem? I'm on a salt-free diet. It's taking me a very long time. There's no paper in the toilet. Do you have a computer? When you call the naturals, it feels so salty. Shall we say goodbye? Would you like to come to the beach with me? Could you take a picture of me? Where are you staying?